Hey everyone, and welcome to RUBIN'S Mind Lab, where we break down the latest research into what it really means. Ever wonder if studying in a certain way now can actually make you learn better later, even brand new stuff? Well, this new study dives right into that mystery. Imagine you are learning about a new bunch of things, like maybe different artists' painting styles or types of rocks. Researchers are asking a super interesting question: can the way you judge how well you are learning right now actually change how well you learn new things afterward? This is called the forward effect, and it is like a ripple in a pond, where one action creates effects down the line. So, what they wanted to know is if making judgments about your learning, called judgments of learning or JOLs, can help you learn new things better later on. And a big part of this is figuring out if getting feedback on those judgments changes things. They tested this with college students learning about paintings and rock types. Think about learning in school. You don't just memorize facts, right? You need to connect ideas, see patterns, and use what you learned in new situations. This is called inductive learning. It is super important for solving problems and understanding the world around us. Researchers have been trying to figure out the best ways to help us learn inductively. And this study looked at two things that might help: retrieval practice, which is like actively trying to remember something from your brain, and metacognitive judgments, which are basically your thoughts about your own thoughts, like judging how well you understand something. We already know that testing yourself or retrieval practice is really good for remembering stuff you actually studied. This is called the testing effect, but the cool part is it can also help you learn new things studied after the test. This is the forward testing effect. For example, if you study some paintings and then take a mini test on them, you might actually learn new paintings by different artists better afterward. Now, what about judgments of learning, or JOLs? These are when you estimate how likely you are to remember something later. The big idea here is that making a JOL might actually make you try to retrieve the information from your memory, even if you are not being tested directly. This is called covert retrieval, like a secret memory search. And if it is doing that, it might have the same forward learning benefits as actual testing. But there is a catch. Not all JOLs are the same. Some might really trigger that memory search, while others might just make you feel familiar with the material without really digging into your memory. So this study set out to carefully compare different types of JOLs and see how they affect learning. They looked at 4 main ways to practice, or judge your learning: truly retrieving the answer, making a JOL where you only see part of the information, like a painting without the artist's name; making a JOL where you see all the information, like the painting and the artist's name; and just restudying the material. They wanted to see which of these helped people learn new things better. In the first experiment, they had students learn about different artists' painting styles. They were split into 4 groups. One group had to actually recall the artist's name from a painting, that is overt retrieval. Another group just looked at paintings and artist names again, that is restudy. Then there were 2 JOL groups. One group saw a painting and then had to judge how likely they were to remember the artist's name, that is a Q, only JOL. The other group saw the painting and the artist's name and then made their judgment a Q target JOL. After this first round of learning, everyone studied paintings from new artists. Then they were tested on both the old and new artists. The main question was whether the practice they did in the middle, between studying the first set of artists and the second set, would help them learn the new artists better. And here is where it gets really interesting. They found that the groups that did something more active, like actually trying to remember the artist's name from the painting, overt retrieval, or making that judgment based only on the painting Q, only JOL, were better at learning the new artists. The restudy group and the Q target JOL group, where they saw the answer while making their judgment, didn't do as well at learning the new stuff. Think about it this way. When you only see the painting and have to guess the artist, your brain is forced to dig into its memory. When you see the painting and the name, your brain might just think, "Oh yeah, I've seen this before," without really searching for the name. That deeper search, that retrieval, seems to be the key to helping you learn new things later. They even asked participants how much they felt like they were trying to remember. And people who said they tried harder in the Q-only JOL group actually learned better. The experimenters also looked at how long people took to make their judgments. They found that with the Q-only JOLs, the time it took to make a judgment and the actual judgment itself had a kind of inverted U shape. This means that quick judgments were likely based on just looking at the painting. Longer judgments meant the brain was searching for the answer. And then really fast judgments for high confidence probably meant they quickly found the answer. This pattern is like a fingerprint for retrieving information from memory. So, what is the takeaway from experiment 1? It really suggests that making judgments of learning where you don't see the answer, like looking at a painting and trying to recall the artist, can act like a mini test. This covert retrieval, this private memory search, helps your brain prepare to learn new material better. Seeing the answer while making your judgment, however, doesn't seem to have that same benefit for future learning. Now, they wanted to see if this held up with different materials. So, in experiment 2, they used pictures of rock types instead of paintings. They compared resting again with cue-only jols. And this time they added a twist. Some participants got feedback after each jol. They were told the correct rock type, and some didn't. The big question here was, does getting feedback make those cue-only jols even better at helping you learn new rock types later on? The results were pretty consistent. The cue-only jols, whether they got feedback or not, still help students learn new rock types better than just resting. Interestingly, adding feedback didn't seem to make a big difference in how much new material they learned afterward. This is important because it suggests that the act of trying to retrieve the information, the retrieval itself, is what is causing the forward learning benefit, not necessarily getting the correct answer immediately after. Even if you sometimes get it wrong or your memory search isn't perfect, the effort of that search seems to prime your brain for future learning. So experiment 2 reinforces the idea that cue-only jols are a powerful tool for improving future learning, and that receiving immediate feedback on those judgments doesn't necessarily boost this forward effect. The core mechanism seems to be the retrieval process itself. What does all this mean for us? It tells us that how we engage with learning materials matters a lot. Simply rereading or seeing the answer while you judge your understanding isn't as effective for future learning as actively trying to recall information. When you are prompted to make a judgment of learning, especially when you only have partial information, you are essentially doing a mini retrieval practice session. This covert retrieval strengthens your ability to learn new, related material. The studies also highlight that not all metacognitive judgments are created equal. The type of prompt you get and whether it encourages genuine memory retrieval is critical. If you are just told to rate your understanding while seeing the answer, your brain might take a shortcut instead of engaging in deep learning. It is also worth noting that people are different. Some might naturally try harder to retrieve information during these jols, while others might not. This means that the benefit of these tasks can vary from person to person, and understanding our own learning habits is key. The researchers suggest a couple of big ideas for why this works. One is that retrieval helps reduce confusion with older material, making it easier to learn new things. Another, and their findings lean more towards this, is that the experience of trying to retrieve something, and maybe even failing, makes you more motivated and careful when you study new material later on. It's like your brain saying, okay, that was a bit tough. I need to pay more attention next time. Of course, no study is perfect. In experiment 1, the overt retrieval task was a recognition task, where you pick from a list. This might not be as powerful as a free recall task, where you have to come up with the answer completely on your own. Future studies could explore how different types of retrieval tasks affect this forward learning. They also mentioned that sometimes people might interpret trying to remember differently in different tasks. So using things like eye tracking or thinking aloud could give even clearer insights into what is happening in people's minds. So what is the practical advice? If you are using educational apps or platforms, look for ones that ask you to judge your understanding based on partial information. Think of those questions where you see a picture and have to guess the artist, or you see a term and have to recall its definition without the answer being right there. These are likely engaging that beneficial retrieval process. Educators and learners can also try to build in these types of low-stakes judgment activities that encourage memory retrieval before moving on to new content. And if you find yourself quickly clicking through these judgment prompts, it might be a sign that you are not engaging in retrieval, and you might want to slow down and really try to access that info memory. Ultimately, the trick seems to be prompting your brain to actively retrieve information rather than just passively reviewing it. This research shows us that our judgments about learning aren't just passive observations. They can actively shape how we learn in the future. By focusing on the act of retrieval, especially through tasks like cue-only judgments of learning, we can prime our brains to be more receptive to new information. It is a powerful reminder that active engagement with our own memory is a key ingredient for effective and lasting learning. Thanks for joining me today on RUBIN'S Mind Lab. If you found this interesting, give this video a like, leave a comment with your thoughts or questions, and don't forget to subscribe for more dives into the fascinating world of psychology. Until next time, keep exploring your mind.